Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. I'm Faith Brynel, and this is the podcast where we break down legal careers, build confidence, and give you the tools to succeed. So today's episode is a really powerful one because we're stepping slightly outside of the traditional legal path to talk about transferable skills and something that every future lawyer needs. So this is communication, leadership, and storytelling. I'm joined by Jay Bailey Stephenson, founder of MJBS Communications, with over 15 years of experience in internal communications across global organizations. Jay specializes in strategic messaging, leadership communication, and helping people connect to purpose. And that is something that every lawyer needs. So, Jay, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Faith. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. It's lovely to be here with you.
Excellent, Jay. Welcome. And I'm glad to have you here on the podcast. So for you, Jay, what does effective leadership communication look like, particularly during periods of change within organizations?
Well, for me, effective leadership communication during change comes down to three things: one, clarity; two, consistency; and three, humanity. And people don't expect leaders to have all the answers, but what they do want is honesty. People do appreciate transparency, even if it's not great news, and they want direction, and they also want a sense that someone is steering the ship with purpose. Where are we going? Where's this change taking us?
Hmm. Yeah.
So, in practice, that means saying, here's what we know, here's what we don't know yet, and here's what we're going to do next. That's the direction that people are looking for. And it's amazing how much more trust you build when you stop trying to be perfect
Hmm.
and actually sounding real. And as a communications professional, I've worked in global organizations, professional services, banking, finance, and in the public sector.
Hmm.
And I always like to remind leaders that if you don't fill the silence, someone else will. And so the rumor mill gets going, gossip, and misinformation. So even if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know yet, but we'll be able to tell you by the end of the month or whatever. So it's really important just being honest and being transparent.
Excellent, Jay. Well, thank you very much for your insight in terms of the importance and necessity of transparency. And I know that that's a transferable skill that lawyers can take forward, especially in their career. It's about being transparent. It's about looking at consistency, clarity, and humanity, because people and your clients need to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and how it affects them. But as you said, it's that honesty and reassurance from leadership. And Jay, thank you very much for speaking about your framework there. Three important things to help these people and help aspiring lawyers. You've spoken candidly around connecting people to their purpose. So how, in your opinion, can aspiring professionals, especially those entering the legal field, and now we're thinking more of on a transferable skills basis, communicate their purpose clearly and confidently?
Purpose, it sounds really deep when you say that, don't you? What is your purpose on this earth? And it's like a deep question. But often people think about purpose and they think about their brand and a strap line, and they think we've got to have a purpose statement and whatever. But
Yeah.
sometimes that's platitudes, because your purpose is deeper rooted than that. It's the thread that runs through everything that you do. Even if you're silent, there's evidence of your purpose. It runs through everything you do, every decision that you make. And it's not just in the legal profession, because whether you're an aspiring lawyer or any profession, I would say start with your why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Not with your job title, which is why purpose is applicable to all of us, regardless of what profession we're in. So with purpose, it's about asking yourself, what, doing, or why am I doing this? So, what problem have I been called to solve? Who do I want to advocate for? What values do I refuse to compromise on, regardless of the paycheck or the, or the
Mm,
fee? What are my non-negotiables? So once you're clear on that,
mhm,
communicating your purpose becomes easier. Even if you're silent, people should be able to look at you and go, "Yeah, what her purpose is. I know what
mhm,
his purpose is." And it stops then sounding like an elevator pitch, and starts sounding like conviction. No,
mhm,
these are my values. This is what I stand on, no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I am, no matter where I'm going. And as that confidence grows in your purpose, which is rooted in something deeper than your brand and your, all the fancy glitter,
mm,
it's, more about, I hope they like me, I hope I fit in, and you feel like you have to wear a mask. When you're
mhm.
deep in your purpose, that's when the authenticity comes in, and you're being you, you're being your authentic, real self.
Well, thank you, Jay, for your perspective about authenticity and the importance of it, and talking about around being intentional with your messaging and building on that clear sense of purpose is something where it requires that deep self-reflection to think about what can I bring to a certain scenario, what skills do I have, and how can I benefit people and how can I help people. In order to understand your purpose, you have to understand who you are and what you bring to the table, the importance of your lived experiences, because all of you have different lived experiences that you
Yeah.
know no one can ever take away from you. So you have to use those lived experiences to connect with the audience, to connect with the people that you will meet and the people that you will truly inspire. Barristers are known to advocate more in terms of verbal advocacy, but solicitors do have to advocate in terms of when they meet the client firsthand, they have to listen to the client's problem and they have to
Mm,
advocate and speak about a possible solution. I
yeah.
definitely think about it's looking beyond those monetary values. Yes, you need funding, no one denies that, but
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
also find, yeah, some sympathy with your people that you meet. One thing that we're quite big on here is the mantra of pivot and don't panic. Your journey can begin now. So this ties in nicely to the next question I've got for you, Jay, which is looking at the mindset shift. What was the biggest transition or mindset shift you experienced moving from corporate roles into founding MJBS Communications?
Wow, it was a big shift. I'm not gonna lie.
Fair enough.
In a nutshell, steep learning curve does spring to mind. I mean, it's going from you work for a corporate giant or a UK company, and you go into your own business and
Hmm.
realize I am now head of every department. I'm
Yeah.
leadership, I'm strategy, I'm delivery, I'm finance, I'm HR, I'm IT, heaven help me. In corporate life, you kind of have layers of structures, you have bureaucracy, and I've certainly worked for very bureaucratic organizations where you're sort of 15 places away from the CEO and all of that kind of thing. But as a founder, you are the structure, and whatever you build builds around you or below you or
Mm,
whatever, whichever way you want to do it, whether you want partnerships or whether you want a team working for you. But the real mindset shift for me
mm.
was I stopped waiting for permission. You kind of, you didn't have that huge sign off process where you came up with an idea, you've been working on a project for 6 months, and then you wait another 18 months for somebody to sign
Yeah.
it off and go, yeah, it's a goer, it's a goer. And you literally can just go, right, well, I've decided I'm going to do this, crash and burn, fail, whatever. I'm going to give it a go. And if it flies, it flies. If it doesn't, I'll learn my lessons from that and I'll move on. And you don't have somebody else going, oh no, you can't do that for another 6 months or whatever. And so I've had to learn to trust my expertise.
Yes, yes.
You've not got anybody to hide behind, really. And and back my
Oh.
ideas. it's then me then having the confidence to go, well, I've got to put myself out there and I've got to do this and I've got to try that.
Yeah.
And then start building something that's aligned with my values and going back to that purpose piece and
Mm-hmm.
my why has kind of pivoted. It's rooted, but in terms of what I do,
Mm.
is in service to others, and that my purpose is very much rooted in that. And so everything that I do, it's in service to others. And it's not about my job description, it's not about whatever title I want to give myself, and I can give myself any title that I want. But it's more about what is my
Mm.
purpose, what is my why, and then how do I then translate that into action, actually a business plan and then executing that. So really, honestly, it's a good level of freedom, but with that comes a lot of hard work, a lot of hard decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but then that sense that you don't want to go back, you want to keep moving forwards.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you very much for candidly and clearly sharing your perspective around transitioning from having to run your ideas through others and waiting for that permission. But as CEO and founder, you don't have to ask anyone for permission. You're able to implement any ideas that you have. And I can completely resonate with that in my own role as being the CEO and founder of a CIC. So again, as the person who makes the decisions, you can have a vision. I pray towards that vision and then I can enact that and go forward. I think is really important speaking about that because especially for listeners who are coming from those non-traditional paths or building something alongside a legal career, you mentioned some really strong and interesting points around being intentional with your messaging. And as a founder, that responsibility sits on your shoulders because your communication sets the tone for everything. And your purpose, going back to the previous question around your why, you're servicing people, that purpose has to be clearly evident through every decision, every message, every interaction, so that whilst it's not always been explicitly stated, when you're silent, your purpose can still speak for you. And I think that's such a powerful way to frame it. And people can then see the alignment between what you say and what you do.
Mm.
And that's why, and I really believe that completely. I know it completely aligns with this podcast. It's pivot and don't panic. Your journey can begin now because there are going to be decisions where you feel like you want to panic, but you've got to pivot. It's really important that you
Yeah,
don't panic.
absolutely. I know all about pivoting now, girl.
Yeah.
Yes,
Honestly,
yes,
yeah, it's true. I think you have to be able to be flexible. You have to be adaptable. And you are going to have
yes.
times where you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do from here? It can be, you are going to find scenarios that are quite new. You've got to pivot and not panic. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I love that, by the way, pivot and not panic. I love that.
You've got to pivot and not panic.
Love
That's
it.
so important. Yeah, you've got to be so aware. I think that's just so great. I know that the listeners really are enjoying this episode so far because there's a lot of key takeaways, especially as you said, your transition from corporate roles into business, and it can be quite a leap of faith. But I just want to tabernacle a little bit more on the storytelling element because when you are, starting your own brand, you've got to establish the why behind the brand. How important for you now is storytelling and narrative development as a skill for future lawyers and professionals more broadly?
Storytelling is everything. It's what engages people, isn't it? People's
Yeah.
stories. And you mentioned about people's lived experiences.
Yeah.
They're probably some of the most powerful storytelling that you can have. And
Hmm.
whether you're a lawyer, a solicitor, a barrister, a CEO, a junior partner,
Yeah.
whatever it is, essentially you're doing the same thing
Mm.
in that you're making sense of information so that people can act on it. So, in some way, you need to communicate what it is that you're trying to articulate and get people to understand, whether it's to influence people, whether to educate people. That storytelling piece is so important. So whether you're a lawyer or whether you're a judge or whatever it is, in particular, they're great storytellers. I love watching legal shows because I just love the way they weave their arguments and they present the evidence in such a compelling way that you're just hooked and you're like, wow. So it's either, oh my gosh, they're
Definitely.
guilty,
Yeah.
or oh my gosh, they're innocent because
Yeah.
it's so compelling.
Yeah.
And I've been watching this drama called Bull on I forget the channel, but the guy, he's in an NCIS, and I digress if people don't know what I'm talking about, but he's a psychologist, and he
Mhm.
puts together juries based on things that they've said. They ask them questions, and then based on their responses, he decides, yes, they're a good juror, or, I'm going to cut them. Um, and it's so fascinating,
Mm,
but it's really about how they shape their narratives, and he then makes a judgment call on that. It's like, oh, how did they respond to that? So narratives and storytelling and what you say is so important, to build
mhm.
arguments, to help people understand complex issues in a way that really moves them. And in the legal profession, as I say, I'm hooked on legal dramas. I just I just love the way they present the arguments
Yeah.
and the case, and present the evidence in such a compelling way. And in a world where we're drowning in information, there's just
Mm,
deluge of information out there on social media and all of
mhm,
that if people tell a clear, compelling story without
mm.
losing the facts, those are the ones that stand out for me. And it's cuts out all the noise, all the misinformation, and you go, right, yeah, I get it. I understand that, or that makes sense to me. So storytelling is so key.
Amazing. 100% agree with that. I think, it's such an important point around storytelling, about actually having a story to tell and you having a story to tell and utilizing kind of the area of storytelling. Because when you're thinking about storytelling in law, it's about, yes, you want it to be compelling, as you mentioned, but you also mentioned it's about making complex information clear and meaningful. So it has to be relatable, as you said, looking at those legal dramas. It does give you a good sense as to how a good advocate actually engages the audience, engages the judge as well to see things from their point of view, to advocate for their client. And, as you said, you're constantly shaping a narrative from the facts to understand, what really happened and why it matters. And when you're storytelling, it connects the law to real people and lived experiences, which is it's a bedrock of law. Because when you're trying, whether you're trying to defend, to persuade, to educate, to reach a fair outcome, it's important that you utilize storytelling. And as I said, and as Jay said, this goes beyond the legal profession. And even if you're, a CEO in a company, or even if you are a judge or a barrister, wherever your walk of life is, and whatever your lived experiences are, if you're transitioning from non-law into law like I did, storytelling is just as important. So yeah, and I completely agree with the legal dramas. I love The Lincoln Lawyer. Really, really good
Yeah,
drama. Yeah. Really
yeah,
interesting cases, the way Mickey kind of just presents himself. And yeah, it's really good. I think, yes, you want to be, I think it's good to shadow, real life barristers and solicitors, but I also do think it's important to watch some legal dramas because it gives you yes, it's going to be dramatized. It is a drama, but it just allows you to see things from a different perspective. And I do love legal dramas also. So
absolutely,
thanks, Jay, for
absolutely.
reminding me of that actually. To speak about. So if anyone does want my top list of legal dramas, you can comment down below and I'm happy to share that with you. I'm sure Jay would also share her top legal dramas as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. To conclude this really interesting episode this afternoon, your work emphasizes emotional clarity and human connection. So in the context of high pressure, careers like law, how can individuals communicate with impact whilst remaining authentic?
It goes back to knowing your why. It's that thread that runs through everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier on in the podcast about authenticity, and it's simply about just showing up and being human. And I think in the legal profession, that is so key, because you're representing clients, individuals, or corporations. It's You're not a legal bot, you're not a machine that just churns out facts. You are a human being that
Mm-hmm.
needs to connect, make that human
Yes.
connection in order to make your case, or or put together case files, or make a judgment on a case. So there's so many factors, but they all involve humans. And in a world of AI and social media, I think sometimes that gets forgotten that we're
Mm,
you know we're still dealing with human beings, and we're not,
Mm.
putting through people through a sausage machine. And I mean, in a high pressured environment, like in a courtroom, there is high emotion
Yes.
because you've got a client, you've got a defendant, you've got witnesses, you've got a victim, you've got all these dynamics going on, and it's important really to respond to that environment and not
Mhm.
react, not be reactive, and not kind of just be going off at a tangent. You have to stay
Yes.
focused, and you have to respond to the signals. And I mean, if somebody's on a witness stand and they're getting upset, would you keep
Mm.
firing questions, or would you ask them, are you okay? Or
Yeah,
do we
yeah.
do we need a recess? So it's about being conscious of your environment,
Yes.
and just really remaining human,
Mhm.
communicating instead of trying to point score, because some people will just go at something, and they'll forget that they need to communicate clearly. They need to communicate with empathy, and we talked
Mhm.
about that, about being empathetic and being compassionate and genuinely connecting with people rather than performing. It's like, oh, I want to put on a good show here.
Mm.
Oh, I've got loads of legal arguments, and I've got all of this stuff that I want to impress everybody with. It's about actually connecting, engaging people in what you're trying to say, getting your
Mhm.
argument across in a convincing and authentic way. And I always tell my clients that I work with, and those are corporates and individuals, is that your voice is most powerful when it's grounded and when it's human and not necessarily polished. And you might not know the right words to say, but it is
Mhm.
about that human connection. So take a breath, think about what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to say, and speak from a place
Mhm.
where, people feel, okay, this person's making a difference. Whether they agree with you or not, and they trust you more for it.
Mhm.
Are they trusting what you're saying? Whether you're sharing your expertise, whether you're making that argument, whether you're sharing that evidence, do people trust what you are saying? Don't be hard on yourself, I
Mhm.
think, is the thing, because it can be intimidating, and particularly if you're amongst your peers or you're in
Yeah.
a meeting with a senior partner.
Mhm.
Remember, even a senior partner in your law firm or can sometimes forget where they put their glasses. I know I do. Um, you know,
Yeah.
I've been in the corporate world, and I know that
Mhm.
in some of, I haven't been in a legal practice, but I
Mhm.
know that I've worked in professional services where you've got partners, and you've got all of these people, and it can be quite intimidating, and you can feel so small and you
Mm.
can feel like, oh, do I really matter? Or, does what I have to say really, really matter? But it's really just remember that you're human and they're human. Some
Excellent.
humans are nicer than others. We're all human at the end of the day, and I think it's really about remaining human, remaining real.
Excellent, Jay. Well, what a wonderful place to end today's episode, because you've made some very good, important points, really. First of all, about knowing your why, how it grounds everything you do. That authenticity is when it allows people to connect with you and be more willing to connect with you. I'm really glad that you spoke about being in meetings and having to advocate for your opinion, understanding that your opinion does matter, and that sometimes we see people as perfect, but everybody has their own challenges. It might be hidden, but it doesn't mean they're not going
Yeah.
through something. So don't compare yourself to others, because you never know. You're actually doing really well to even be at that job, to be in those meetings. So just be confident in who you are. And going back to what you said around the court experience and environment, having that level of reading the room, being sensitive to the room, and having empathy is about understanding that human story, that human touch, that human narrative behind the facts. Your arguments are not only legally sound, which is a must, but genuinely resonating with the people hearing them. So, Jay, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a valuable
You're
conversation.
welcome. I've
And
so enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you
I'm
so much,
glad.
Faith.
No, it's been great. And for all of those listening to the episode today, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure that you subscribe. Do share it with someone who needs it, and do subscribe on your usual podcast platform of choice. So it could be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so many others. But do stay tuned for conversations like this. Also, do follow us at Faith Brynel Talks Law on our social media platforms, in particular TikTok and YouTube, where you can get clips in advance of all the episodes. Shout out again to the 55 countries who continue to subscribe and engage. Remember, pivot and don't panic. Your journey begins now. I'm Faith Brynel, and this has been the Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. Bye, everyone.